So how about the thousand that they join ISIS? And what's the appeal for a lot of Westerns to join ISIS?
Well, I think some of the numbers might be exaggerated. We haven't seen any concrete figures about. I mean, we've seen reports in The Independent in Britain a few weeks ago talking about 30 plus British fighters who expressed the desire to leave ISIS because they said they joined to help the Syrians defend themselves against Assad. But since they joined ISIS, all they do is fight Syrian groups, so they are disappointed and would like to leave. We have heard news of defections from ISIS in the last week. And there is also an element of, I mean, there is a certain number of people who are just ignorant and, they are frustrated from Iran's sectarian policies in Iraq and Syria, from the bloodbath against Sunnis in Iraq and Syria. They are disgusted with Western collusion in these mass murders. And they want to, they are youth who have a lot of enthusiasm. They have an excess of enthusiasm and the deficit of sense, if you want. I mean, we have seen reports on some young Muslims who joined ISIS, and, some of the books they ordered from Amazon was, Islam for Dummies. I mean, somebody who reads a book like Islam for Dummies, has no business carrying a gun and telling people how to be a Muslim or not to be a Muslim. So there is a certain element. There is an exploitation of the discontent that's prevalent among Muslim youth, and there is also an exploitation of the ignorance. We have, generation of Muslim youth that are left without proper religious training, proper religious education. They don't have, secular education either to cover for that, and all they have is frustration and at the massacres of Muslims that they see in Syria, Iraq, Central African Republic, in Burma, and it pushes them to join what they see is the most radical group around. And when they look around, they see the angriest and most violent group is ISIS. That being said, I still think that these are a minority because ISIS has effectively been isolated theologically. I think the most prominent Muslim scholars have exposed ISIS's ideology as extremist, as un-Islamic, as bloodthirsty, and as counter to the interests of the Muslims. ISIS has been isolated in Syria. The majority of the Syrian groups have come to an agreement that ISIS's methods are counter to their interests, that they're not interested in fighting Shias who have no hand in their oppression. They're not interested in killing Yazidis just for being Yazidis. They're not interested in a sectarian war with Iran. The Syrians just want their country. They want their country and their dignity and their right. ISIS is trying to drag them into a sectarian war. And they've effectively succeeded in isolating ISIS in Syria. ISIS was a small group until Maliki in Iraq decided to give them half of his army in Iraq. I mean, it wasn't a coincidence that at the moment when the Syrians isolated ISIS and it became just, a little group in the northeast, all of a sudden Maliki, Iran's ally Maliki comes and gives them half of his army, most of it American equipment. It makes you wonder.
How did he do that?
Well, I mean, nobody believes that the Iraqi army just crumbled. I mean, clearly orders were given to the generals and, the officers in the Iraqi army. And we've seen the videos of the officers changing into civilian clothes and being given orders to leave their weapons. Observers of militant groups can tell you the story of the GIAs in Algeria in the 1990s, when the Algerian society rose up in, to oppose the coup by the Algerian military, which, canceled the free and fair elections and took power by force, right? And there was a popular uprising similar to the Syrian revolution. And the popular uprising slowly became, armed, just like the Syrian revolution became armed. And, it was, disciplined in the beginning, and, it focused on military targets and so on. But all of a sudden in Algeria, there appeared this crazy groups. They called themselves the armed Islamic groups. I mean, all they had that was Islamic was the name, the armed Islamic groups. And they started beheading children, putting babies in ovens, right? Beheading people right, left, and center. And they terrorized, the populations that had voted for the Islamists.
Mm.
And 10 years down the road, it, scholarship almost proved beyond doubt that these armed Islamic groups were the creation of the Algerian military intelligence. And the job was to discredit the Islamic uprising in the eyes of the population first, to discredit the Islamic uprising in the eyes of the West, to help the Algerian military rulers to get more funding from the West to exterminate these barbarians, just like ISIS. And the same thing is happening now in Syria. So ISIS is not a new phenomenon. In moments when you have a popular revolt that holds the moral high ground, the Syrians were holding the moral high ground. Assad called them terrorists. It was clear they weren't terrorists. Iran called them sectarian. It was clear they weren't sectarian. They called them bloodthirsty, violent. It was clear they weren't. So there appears this crazy group called ISIS who acts as a bloodthirsty, extremist, sectarian thugs, right? Who does it serve? Does it serve the Syrians? Of course. On the contrary, it serves Assad and Iran. So these phenomena are not new in war zones. They are part of, underground intelligence warfare. God knows who these people take their orders from. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years' time we find that they take their orders from the most unexpected sources, probably from Tehran or from Beirut or from Damascus or even from Western embassies or, Western capitals. So
Well, I
we'll
mean,
see.
this is not just. It's interesting that you brought the Algerian experience. Also, it seems like this is what the Sisi is doing in Egypt, try to demonize the Brotherhood or any resistance, even the left, and demonize them and with all sort of labeling, terrorism, the immoral, and whatever. So, but how about the population itself? Post Arab Spring, isn't there any kind of enlightening and the people kind of not gonna buy into this kind of the boogeyman and then the Muslim extremists and all that, and they know this is not about Islam or about terrorism. This is about power and money and just bring
Sure.
back the military domination of the resources.
I mean, unfortunately, the West can deploy a colossal, propaganda machine. I mean, you've seen in the New York Times 2 days ago the headline that says Arab nations
Yeah.
to assist the U.S. in the war. Well, it's false. Arab nations are against the war. Maybe Arab rulers, it's more accurate. But they don't say Arab rulers, they say Arab nations. The same thing for ISIS. ISIS has an ideology that's so extremist and foreign to the people of the Middle East. It's so foreign to Islam, it's antithetical to it, you know. I mean, to behead a humanitarian aid worker who risked his life to come and assist the Syrians, I mean, there is nothing in Islam that allows that. To kill even Assad soldiers that they take as prisoners, you know, they cannot, Islamically speaking, they cannot kill them without due court process. So this wanton extremist violence is so foreign to the Arab nations of the Middle East. But when you read in the press, they present ISIS as if it's the face of the Syrian revolution, right? They present Arab rulers as if they were the Arab nations, and they present ISIS as if it's the Syrian revolution. I mean, just look at the pressure that's on Muslims worldwide to condemn ISIS.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and I do agree with Obama. ISIS's beheadings are barbaric, but where was he when Muslims were being beheaded by the thousands in Burma? Not by the one, by the thousands. Where was Obama when Muslims were being incinerated, burnt alive in the Central African Republic in their thousands? Where was he when he told Assad Obama that using gas is a red line and then did nothing about it? And Assad, to the present, still uses gas against his people. Where was he when, I mean, every night we see videos on YouTube of Iran's death squads trampling on the heads of Syrian children, you know, chopping off heads, rape as a weapon in war on a very massive scale in Iraq and Syria. Well, where were you, Mr. Obama? You know, or these acts of violence do not qualify as terrorism, or does violence have to be specifically Sunni violence to be called terrorism? I think this is what they're trying to do. They're trying
Or against
to define violence.
or against
Only
Western, or
violence
against whites, or I mean, I can't help but to think about beheading a nation in Gaza, and
Totally.
that would not call for any concern. So that's a tendency there.
So, unfortunately, at the level of the leadership, especially in America, in the Middle East, at the level of states, governments, politicians, government officials, unfortunately, they haven't learned anything from the fiascos of the last 15 years of wars and invasions and destruction and squandering of, you know, people's wealth. We have destroyed the American economy, we've destroyed America's standing in the world, and we haven't learned a thing. The American people are sick of war, for sure. The American people do not want to collude in the oppression of the Syrians. The American people support the struggle for dignity of every nation, whether the Syrians or the Palestinians. But unfortunately, the people holding the power, you know, in the White House, in Congress, in the Senate, are chasing agendas that do not serve the American people. And one is allowed to wonder, whose agenda are they serving?
Well, Professor Slisli, thank you so much.